Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today, we're doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This particular video will be for the Alchemy Best of One format. If you're looking for standard Best of One, Best of Three, Explorer, Historic, all the formats on Arena, we try to cover it every week, provided that there's data available. Similarly, if there is events like this weekend's metagame or qualifier weekend, we'll do deep dives into that. So if you enjoy keeping up to date with the best performing decks on the ladder, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Free, easy, and helps out. And as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, we're closing in on 10,000 subs, so we're trying to make that push by the end of August, trying to hit that goal. So we're going to look at Alchemy Best of One today. We're going to look at the data provided from UntapGG. It's a companion tool that aggregates both your own win rates, you can track your own win rates, as well as provide win rates for kind of a aggregate perspective from all the users and give us cool stats to look at from that regard. So we're going to get into it. So we're looking about pretty much the entirety of the Lord of the Rings release set. Alchemy is not the volume of games played as some of the other formats, so this will give us kind of a good mix. We're going to start off with looking at what are the popularity of decks to date, just in terms of volume of games, like what you're most likely to see on the ladder. And then we're going to look at those kind of a selection of decks that are performing the best in terms of overall win rates. So if we look at the popularity of the day, well, people love the mono black Nazgul deck. It's at 20% overall gameplay, which is a pretty large number, all things considering. The next deck is Alchemy Control, followed by the Rakdos Sacrifice, which is the Anvil decks. We got some mono red. So every other deck's pretty much like low percentage, and then just mono black kind of over the top. I'm going to preface this Alchemy Control deck. I'm not going to get into it. It's putting up some results. It looks like it's beating this Nazgul list, but it's a very like haphazardly thrown together deck. It's not like volume of cards that makes sense. A lot of one-ofs, a lot of tap lands, like poor mana-based decisions, like a one of Triumph for no reason. So it just looks like a kind of I wouldn't recommend it necessarily in that context. There's a good Dimir deck likely out there, but in terms of the volume of games played, it hasn't been come up, and I just don't want to suggest like a deck that's just kind of cards I own, trade binder in that respect. So we're going to jump into it. I'll paste all the deck lists in the video description. If you want to use Untap, the link is in the video description as well, so you can get all these information. So we are going to start off with the Rakdos Sacrifice list. This is a deck from MTG that got #1 Mythic overall last month in Best of 3, and some folks supported it over to the Best of One format as well. So the core of this deck is leveraging Alchemy Anvil. This is allowing you to sacrifice an artifact each turn, and then you get to drain one and then create a 1/1 token. You kind of recycle your token every turn potentially. But you can also turn things from like blood tokens from Voldaren Aperture, Blood Tithe Harvester into it. You have like Research Desk that can be used. You got a Nixless to kind of sacrifice any of the tokens. And this really is taking advantage of both Orcish Bowmasters, giving you multiple bodies that can sack, but also ping, as well as the One Ring. The One Ring can be sacrificed to Alchemy Anvil to get rid of it. The biggest thing this deck usually had an issue in the past, I played a lot of this through various formats, was running out of cards. The One Ring kind of addresses that issue. You also have access to Pylon, which you can convoke and tap other creatures. So this can cost as little as 0 actual mana to cast in this regard. Mount Doom can also be used with the One Ring to kind of sacrifice it in that respect. Some Myrics in the mana base for the grindier matchups. We then go to the aforementioned mono black Nazgul deck. And this deck is playing 9. And you might ask, but how are they playing 9? Well, Nazgul is really cool in the sense that it allows you to play exactly 9 from a flavor perspective. So when it enters the battlefield, the ring tempts you, and then whenever the ring tempts you, you put a 1/1 counter on each wraith you control. So they kind of progressively scale, they trigger each other, you get a whole bunch of value there. The rest of the deck's kind of like a mono black control-ish game plan. Cut downs, go for the throats, Shieldred's Edict in there, you got the Bowmasters, Call to the Ring to provide you a lot of card advantage, as well as get that ring temptation every turn. Shieldred's for life gain, as well as the One Ring. The one kind of quick edit you can do to this deck, I would play a Takenuma in the mana base, and probably maybe 1 to 2 copies of the Myrics as well. Just take advantage of the fact you can create tokens in like heavy kind of removal based matchups. We then pivot to mono red burn. So this is a more aggressive deck. This one looks fairly budget, all things considered. It looks like in total there is 1 rare in this deck. So if you're looking for a more budget-friendly deck to get started in the format, and just play Arena in general, this might be something you want to take a look at. Again, similar to the mana base, just add a Takenuma, and then potentially 1 Mishra's Foundry. But otherwise, this is a burn deck, and you're using things like the Battle, the Invasion of Ringantha to deal 4 damage, Stoke the Flames, similar in Convoke, you can tap your creatures to deal the damage. The Kessig Flame Breather pings your opponent every time you cast a non-creature spell. Kenra gets bigger, Ren's Resolve for card advantage, and then you have your kind of standard burn package, Kumano, Swiftspear, Phoenix, Chicken, Play with Fire. Notable in this format that Kumano has been nerfed, so it doesn't have haste when it flips over. They killed my boy Kumano. But just like a really cheap deck that you could kind of test out in the format. We then go to Mono White Humans. So this is actually a fairly decent deck because a lot of this core is also Explorer legal. It is pretty much the core of the Explorer deck, and then some elements do carry over to Historic Humans. But this deck here is got a bunch of humans. In the sense you have like Benelish Night Council, that gets your next creature to come in with an additional counter on it. Hopeful Initiate gets bigger, Recruitment Officer for card advantage, Copper Coat Vanguard gets your other creatures more power and then provides them with Ward, which can help protect. There is a few number of X1s in this deck, which are pretty susceptible to Bowmaster, but giving the Ward at least taxes your opponent. The Sigardian Evangel can conjure more copies of itself, help you tap down your opponent's creatures, give you some value that way. Adolin is just a really big attacker and lets you go wide. Brutal Cathar for removal. Inquisitor Captain can find any of these cards, kind of like a Collected Company style effect. And then Knight Errant of Eos also finds you extra cards when you convoke. The nice thing is you have a number of vigilance creatures, so you can attack in and then also convoke with it. So this is kind of like the configuration I was mentioning with those other decks. You basically have your basics, your channel land, and then some copy of utility colorless land in there. We'll then go to the money pile, 5-color legends. So if you want to play Aragorn, if you want to play Jodah and cascade into a whole bunch of legends, Dejuru and Hazoret lets you free cast. So you can kind of get ahead on Jodah with things like Gwenna to help you ramp into it. Crucius, well, despite the nerf of being a 3/1 now, this hasn't been updated here, but can help you find your bigger creatures. You have protection effects in Malira, Janira, and Hajar. Ramp in Delighted Halfling as well. Some copies of Terra Sunder as removal. And then Ride Drabics, when your creatures die, they get to come back, so you get a whole bunch of value added there. Really good mana base with Plaza Heroes, Secluded Courtyard, all your creatures are humans. Similar to Forsaken Crossroads to help fix your mana base. And then lastly, we have Blue-White Control. You're seeing all these creature decks going around, so why not Divine Purge your opponent? This deck is taking advantage of both the Ring and Union of the Third Path to gain you a bunch of life when your hand's full. You have Gandalf the White that lets you flash in legendary spells and artifacts, so you can flash in your Ring for protection during like an opponent's attack steps, kind of surprised that way. Kalim is your win con addition to Gandalf. You also have access to Oracle of Alpha, kind of fill your hand. You can make tokens with Sauron's Trickery. The one thing with this deck here, I would probably suggest 1 to 2 copies of the Myrex again. The games are likely going to go long. This provides you a manner to consistently put out a threat in that regard. But this is another deck that's just answering a lot of the things in the format, a lot of removal, and then you're able to just kind of close the game out with like a big fly or something of that nature there. So that's pretty much it. Just wanted to cover at like a high level. In Best of 3, like Brokey's did really well with a Sultai Planeswalker deck. Best of 1 tends to be more linear in terms of like aggressive decks. The Sultai deck likely has some legs to it as well if you want to kind of play that out. You can find it on Crokey's channel. But these are kind of just what's being tracked in terms of Best of 1 for the time being. So let me know what you think of Alchemy. If you still want me to do these videos, kind of judge it based on the view counts. The last few have done fairly reasonable, all things considered. So as long as the views are there, I'll continue to put out Alchemy content, but we'll be consistent with the other formats on Arena, as well as including Historic Brawl as well, occasionally when the new sets drop. In any case, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one, and we'll see you next time.